Over time, the Royal Canadian Mint has produced coins and stamps that commemorate Canada's unexplained phenomena. In 2021, a $20 silver glow-in-the-dark coin was released as part of the 4th installment of their paranormal series. And this is the coin. I know it's rectangular rather than the traditional round coin shape, but this $20 silver piece commemorates the famous Montreal UFO of 1990, which is one of Canada's most well-documented cases. Alright, welcome to the Strange North channel. In this video, I'm going to tell you about this famous Montreal UFO sighting. And if you haven't heard about this and you're interested in this subject, then you'll probably find this interesting. But I have to give a shout out to someone who's already done an excellent video on this subject. There was a video posted a couple years ago called The Mystery of the Montreal UFO by a YouTuber called Lelo. And this guy only has one video on his page, but this is an excellent video on this case. He did extensive archive research, and his video production skills are far better than mine. His video is a bit longer. It's over 36 minutes. I'm going to give you a solid overview of the story, but if you're really interested in this case after watching my video, definitely check out the other video by Lelo. And I'll put a link to his video in the description below, but you should be able to find it easily on YouTube. But this is one of Canada's most well-known UFO cases, and I definitely wanted to cover it on my channel. And I apologize in advance for when I inevitably butcher one of the French names in the story. But I'm just going to jump right into the story, and this happened on November 7th of 1990 in the city of Montreal, Quebec. This UFO was first seen by a guest on the rooftop pool of the Bonaventure Hotel. So the Bonaventure Hotel inhabits the top 2 floors of Bonaventure Place, which is a massive complex in downtown Montreal. When this building was completed in 1967, it was the second largest commercial building in the world at 3.1 million square feet. It's actually one of the very few buildings in Canada to have its own postal code prefix. And so on the evening of November 7th of 1990, a woman in the hotel's rooftop pool saw a UFO about 1,000 feet in the air above the pool. She said it appeared to be a round metallic object with lights on the bottom and then light being emitted from the sides. This object was first spotted at about 7:20 p.m. that evening. And then at about 7:30 p.m. this guest notified the pool's lifeguard, Line St Pierre. And this lifeguard would later produce a sketch of the object, which had 8 yellow lights in a circular pattern surrounded by 6 white beams of light. Line St Pierre immediately notified the hotel's security officer, Albert Sterling, and told him to come to the roof quickly. She also notified a local newspaper called Presse to tell them of the sighting. At about the same time, about a kilometer to the northeast, 2 men also saw a similar light in the sky, and one of these men was Bernard Gannett, who was an entrepreneur and ufologist, and he comes up later in the story. The security officer at the hotel, Albert Sterling, then notified the Montreal Urban Community Police and then called the airport traffic control at Dorval Airport, but the line was busy. After the La Presse newspaper found out about this incident, they sent journalist Marcel Laroche to investigate. When he arrived at the hotel, he saw the UFO and took pictures with his personal camera. Another reporter from La Presse named Jules Bellevaux was also sent to the hotel, and he said that he arrived at the hotel the same time as a policeman and that they both rode the elevator to the rooftop together, and that this policeman jokingly asked the reporter if he should pull out his gun. Around this time, a woman and her daughter were driving on Champlain Boulevard, and they too saw strange lights over downtown Montreal. Francois Lippe was the first police officer on scene, and he too saw the UFO above the hotel. Officer Lippe called his supervising officer, Sergeant Robert Masson, and told him to come to the site. Sergeant Masson arrived at about 8:30 p.m. and he too saw the UFO. He would then contact the RCMP, and they would send out investigator Luc Morin to the hotel to investigate. And of course, investigator Morin would also confirm the sighting of the UFO. The police officers at the hotel would call the Dorval Airport, the Mirabel Airport, and the St Hubert military base, and they all said that they were not detecting anything strange on their radar. But the operator at the Dorval Airport said that he was receiving many calls about strange lights in this area. One of the hotel guests who witnessed the UFO was a pilot with Air Canada, and he estimated that this object was hovering about 2,500 meters in the sky, but it was determined later that there was a layer of snow clouds at about 1,100 meters, so this pilot's assertion was very unlikely. Now, across the street from the hotel there was a construction site, and this site was lit up by floodlights mounted on cranes. Some people thought that the UFO was actually the clouds above the hotel reflecting these construction lights, but when the police ordered these construction lights to be shut off, the UFO was still seen. The cloud cover above the hotel increased over time, and by about 10:15 that evening, the UFO was no longer visible from the hotel. At this point, the investigators, policemen, and journalists left the hotel. At about 11 p.m., a man named Pierre Comartin was driving on Notre Dame Street when he saw strange lights hovering above the Montreal Olympic Stadium, which is about 6.5 kilometers from Bonaventure Place. He said that this object would hover in the same spot for a while and then it would glide around in these smooth movements. However, he said this object was triangular and that it made a rhythmic purring noise, whereas the witnesses at the hotel said that the object they saw was completely stationary, round, and silent. Shortly after the sightings on November 7th, Jules Bellevaux at the La Presse newspaper received a letter dated November 8th, in which someone claimed that his friend was flying a small plane over Montreal between 7:30 and 8 p.m. on the night of the sightings. However, this pilot refused to be interviewed in any capacity. In a newspaper article published shortly after the sightings, the RCMP made a statement confirming the legitimacy of the event, and this is a quote from that article translated from French. Quote, "The RCMP confirmed last night that it is a serious matter and that its agents are currently proceeding to verifications without talking yet about an investigation. The testimonies received were deemed credible." End quote. Some people hypothesized that this object was actually the appearance of the Northern Lights, but this was also dismissed by many people, including by prominent meteorologists. They said there was too much cloud cover and that the Northern Lights typically don't stay stationary like that in the same spot, that they tend to flicker and move around the sky, whereas the object that was seen remained stationary for a number of hours and it didn't really move around. It was also determined later on that no unusual solar activity was recorded that night, making the sightings of northern lights in the area virtually impossible. Strangely, the explanation that this object was merely the construction lights across the road from the hotel being reflected off the clouds became a dominant theory for the sighting, even though the UFO was clearly seen after the local police ordered these construction lights to be shut off. A witness that I mentioned earlier, Bernard Guenette, was a ufologist and member of MUFON, which is an international organization that investigates these sightings. Bernard Guenette would investigate these sightings and he would collaborate with American ufologist Richard F. Haynes, who was also a longtime psychologist for NASA. In spring of 1992, Haynes and Guenette published a report called Details Surrounding a Large Stationary Aerial Object Above Montreal. In this report, Haynes asserted that there was no doubt that there was indeed a large, dense object hovering above the hotel that night. He estimated that this object was hovering at an altitude of between 1,060 meters and 2,700 meters, so quite a range, and that this object had a diameter of at least 540 meters. But Mr. Haynes was basing a lot of his findings on photograph analysis from the pictures taken by Marcel Laroche, and some have claimed that his analysis was a bit simplistic and inconclusive. But besides this report, there were still multiple credible witnesses that held firm to their stories. In December of 2006, the Canadian TV show Northern Mysteries featured the Montreal UFO in one of their episodes. This episode covered the story fairly well, but it did serve to fuel conspiracy theories, claiming, for example, in their presentation that the Canadian military had run interception reconnaissance flights and wouldn't disclose their reports. But the military completely denied this, saying that they didn't do interception flights due to nothing unusual showing up on radar. In 2008, Belgian ufologist Wim van Utrecht learned about this case and put forward the idea that this UFO sighting could have been caused by a rare optical phenomenon known as light pillars. Again, that video I mentioned by Lelo goes into this aspect in particular in incredible detail. He actually thinks that light pillars are a probable explanation, whereas others definitely do not. At any rate, this event became one of Canada's most famous UFO sightings, commemorated with the silver coin piece that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, produced by the Royal Canadian Mint in 2021. And I just love that the Mint does stuff like this to commemorate different paranormal events in Canada's history. And the sighting is unusual in that it happened in the downtown of a major urban centre in Canada. Most of Canada's famous UFO sightings occur in places that are a bit more remote. And that pretty much wraps up this video. I've always been fascinated by the story, and it's definitely one of the most famous UFO cases in Canadian history. And again, if this story piqued your interest, you should definitely check out that video by Lelo. He just does an incredibly comprehensive deep dive on the story, and I was really impressed with that video. At any rate, I hope you found this interesting and informative, and if you'd like to watch more of my content in general, please consider subscribing to my channel. I upload at least one new video per week. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Strange North channel.